Welcome to our Sound for Video session, Soundies. Good to have you here today. It's the 26th of September, 2021. And for our Sound for Video session today, we have a few things planned. Of course, let's head on over to our agenda and we'll show you what we've got here. First up, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look to the new, relatively recent book, Behind the Sound Cart. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I haven't read the whole thing. I've started and really impressed with the information that's available in there, and so I want to talk a little bit about that. After that, just a short discussion. It's not a demo or anything like that because I just got them, but Shure sent over some of their new Duraplex lavalier microphones as well as an Axient Digital kit, which I'm super excited about. This is, for those not familiar with the Axient Digital kit or Axient Digital wireless system from Shure, it is basically top of the line. It is the newest system from Shure, and it does some really, really impressive things. Then, of course, we'll go into our question and answer session for some questions we had submitted ahead of time, and then finally we'll go to the chat for some questions there. So first, let's start off with Behind the Sound Cart, and we'll go to our overhead cam here, take a look at this. So for those that are not familiar with this, it's a relatively new book from Petrushka, and I'm not sure how to say her last name. Mirza, I think, is probably, hopefully close. So she is a utility sound technician, a UST, sometimes referred to as a utility, a sound utility, lots of different names for that. In the olden days, they used to call them cable pullers, but they updated the name. So I think UST is a much better name, utility sound technician. But they're usually the third person in the sound department on productions like movies or TV sets. And she's got a lot of great experience. She's been working in the field for quite some time. And so the book is interesting from the standpoint, of course, she talks about what a UST is, but she does some really practical things that I think are interesting. For example, she says, is your personality a good match for film? Talks about the business side of art, education and training. Then she does get into some pre-production things, equipment, show prep, some of the more technical things. She talks about expendables, production, running the show, booming, planting microphones, wiring, so on and so forth. And she's got also some interesting things. There's a section here on COVID-19 protocols and cleaning the gear, which is really, information that's relatively new given the world that we live in here. She talks about some of the special tools needed, safety, some really practical things here as well, wasted time and energy, building your career and maintaining your career. So some really great information. So it's not a cheap book, but keep in mind this is a very niche field. And so, but anyway, she's worked on some big productions you've probably heard of. Here she is working, or in this case, she was working on mic placement for Ad Astra. She's worked with a lot of A-list actors. So there's a picture here earlier in the book where she's putting wireless on Brad Pitt. Lots of great information and great experience that she's able to share. So some really good information. If you are interested in production sound for film or TV and getting into the field, definitely a worthwhile book to take a look at. Okay. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Shure Duraplex lavaliers and the Axient Digital system, digital wireless microphone system. Let me head on over to the Mac here for just a minute. Just in case you're not familiar with the Axient Digital system, let me tell you a little bit about it. So here, for example, it's one of their slot-in dual-channel receivers. They have it, in this case, it looks like it's slotted into a camera, probably a broadcast camera. But let me just get back over. It looks, I thought I lost my place here. Here is, okay, so if you want to learn more about the Axient Digital system, we will have a review, it's not really going to be a review, more of an overview, probably in the next couple of weeks. But just so you understand what the system consists of, there is, let's see, where is it? Down here, okay. So there's a micro body pack transmitter. They have this one's show link enabled. One of the interesting features of this. There's handheld microphones. There's a waterproof transmitter. There's one that is often used in sports to mount on the athletes. It's actually bendable. It's flexible, which is kind of interesting. Plug-on transmitter, dual-channel receiver, or 4-channel receiver, rack mount, dual-channel rack mount receiver, and the newest one here is the slot system. So this is for sound bags and for slotting into cameras. And in fact, if we go to the overhead camera here, I'll show you. We've got they sent one over for me to put to use here. So I haven't even put it into my bag yet and hooked it up, but this will go into the Sound Devices SL2. So I have the slot system that goes along with my Sound Devices 888, and we'll be able to plug that in. And then this does a dual channel reception here. Here's the 81 transmitter pack. This is probably the biggest pack, I think, of all of them. This and the 80X1, I think, are a similar size. So it's a little on the larger side, probably more useful for, I think you're probably going to see this a little bit more commonly for, not for film and TV, but for other, maybe live sound. The batteries are, you've got a rechargeable battery that's removable, replaceable. You can actually charge the pack here by putting it into a slot charger. Uses a 3-pin connector. See if they stripped it with battery power. Good. So there're just a lot of really interesting features. One of the from the kind of looking at the overall system, one of the things that's interesting here is that you don't necessarily, I don't think you set gain on the transmitter pack. That's all done at the receiver, so you have full control from the receiver, which is really nice. It also does, the system does quad diversity, and it also does frequency diversity, so it can actually change the frequencies that you're using, and it also does quad diversity at the antenna level. So if you are working in a really big venue, you can set up 4 external antennae, and it can actually use all of those to act as your diversity in different, you can set them up, for example, the example they give in the one of the videos here on the site. If you come up here, the SHURE Axient Digital pushes the limits of RF. Let's go ahead and bring that up here. They actually show it in a stadium, so they have people standing at various places within the stadium, and then they also go into the tunnel, and so they're using a different set. You can see right here they have their antenna. So they have their A and B antennas set up here, and then they have their D and C set up at the entrance to the tunnel, and then they're able to go into the tunnel and still maintain reception in there. So, and then we also, one of the other features is that this guy's about 200 and some yards away from the A and B antenna using a handheld transmitter. And one of the features of Axient Digital in addition is that it doesn't need as much signal to noise ratio as you typically would need for a wireless system. And so you can transmit at a much lower power and still break through with and get a good signal and a good clean signal. In this case, they're in Chicago. The stadium's empty because it was shot during, I think it was shot in 2020 during COVID, so they didn't really have a big event that they could go and demonstrate it at. But they did have a lot of RF energy going on with the city. This is Soldier Stadium right in Chicago. Anyway, so we'll have more coming up on that. Let me just show you, let's go back to the overhead here. I want to show the Duraplex mics. So the Duraplex mics are a new set of lavalier microphones, and for any that have been part of the community here for a while, you probably know I'm pretty fond of the Twinplex lavalier microphones from SHURE. They're actually probably one of my favorites. This is the new Duraplex, and the interesting thing about the Duraplex is that it's less expensive, first of all, than the Twinplex. Twinplex, a lot of those came in, depending on the particular model you got and the termination you got, they were somewhere in the $500 range. These are closer to $300. And just for size, here's the kind of the standard size of Post-it note, the original size of Post-it notes that came out. And just so you can get a sense for the size, they call it sub-miniature. It's not the smallest sub-miniature mic I've seen. The Countryman B6, of course, is smaller, but that's what it looks like there. The couple of things that I really like about the Twinplex microphones, and hoping for the same with the Duraplex, is, first of all, the sound quality is some of the best I've heard on a lavalier mic. Number two, the cable is really, really well engineered, and you don't get a lot of problems with it kinking up over time. They're really tough as well. So I've had really good luck with those on the Twinplex, hoping, and I believe they use the same cabling here for the Duraplex. They also have a headset version of the mic, which will give that a test as well. And you can see here it's basically it's the same mic on a headset, ear hung type of headset. So we'll be doing a test on that as well. I've actually had some questions come up about earset microphones recently. One of the questions was, how do I get better sound? I've got a lavalier microphone, and excuse me, why don't we go back to our main camera here? I've got a lavalier microphone. I'm doing education, teaching, and I don't love the sound, and it falls off when I turn my head, and it just sounds kind of muffled, and sometimes I get clothing rustle. If it's okay for the microphone to be seen, a headset is a fantastic option. It really positions the microphone in pretty much the optimal position in terms of sound quality. Follows your head when you turn. Of course, the downside is it's visible and it can be seen. But I think for lecturing and education, really good option. So we'll take a closer look at those as well. All right. Any questions about any of those items in the chat there? Danny's going to take a quick look through here and see if there's anything that people want to talk about on those two topics. I wonder how the rejection of the unwanted RF bleeding into the system, say as the stadium, would be full of RF sources. Yeah, we'll have to. I don't know the answer to that question, but they're claiming in their marketing material in that video that it's able to compete pretty nicely with all of that. Again, because it doesn't require as much signal to noise, they're able to get a clean signal. Again, along with the RF diversity and the quad diversity, antenna diversity, so it can do a lot of pretty magical things in terms of working around any potential problems. So we'd have to see. We have to actually have someone test it with a full stadium at some point to see how that goes, or a full venue of some sort. Lloyd, what's your opinion of a good boom mic pairing for the Twinplex? I've been using the DPA 4017B, which pairs pretty nicely. I will say that the Sennheiser MKH416 sounds different. I think you can still EQ them in post to get them close enough, but the DPA seems to fit pretty nicely. I didn't feel like I was having to do a lot of work to get those two working together nicely. So that's my experience with those so far. What's the cost of that wireless system? Sinoga, this is definitely one of the most expensive you can get. I believe the dual channel receiver, we'll have to look them up. I didn't look them up. I've looked them up sometime in the past, but I think it's like $3,500 per dual channel receiver for the slot-in version. And then the transmitters are well over $1,000. I think they're probably close to $1,500, maybe more. They're expensive. It's definitely kind of like one of the best you can get out there. So it's not cheap. It's not consumer oriented. We'll say that for sure. Would love to see the white paper on how they manage RF image rejection and so on. Yeah, I think, I don't know if they have that specifically on the site, if they have any white papers. I didn't see any white papers listed. It's nice to see, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Vincent. But the nice thing what I'm excited about here is that Shure has been big in wireless for a long time, actually dominating in some areas. And I think traditionally you've seen them more often in venues and live sound reproduction, but it's great to see them with a dual channel slot receiver, a bag receiver that you can use. So I would anticipate that you're going to start to see them more in film and TV production as well. So good stuff. Okay. Are we ready to move on to our Q&A?
Oh, I just wanted to shout out a super chat.
Oh, super chat from M. Thank you so much. M, thanks for coming by, and I hope you have an awesome Sunday as well.
And then there was one other. Oh, just a comment.
Mike says, I love headset mics, but I find many talking heads are reluctant to use them, too self-conscious. Yep. Agreed. That's the big trade-off. And I think that what's interesting to me is that, for example, one place you see them, TED Talks are where you see them a lot. I think they use them in almost all the TED Talks I've seen. And I think the reason they do that is that these are people that are probably used to giving stage presentations. I think in those situations, most people that are experienced are willing to wear them for those. But for like sit-down interviews, I think they're less common to see them. But yeah, there's definitely some reluctance there, both from like producers and directors don't necessarily like to see them, but sometimes, again, in like the lecture scenario, I think it's a really good choice. A lot less fuss, and just another option out there. What company best competes with Shure? Well, it depends on the market you're talking about. If you're talking about theater and venues, you'll see Sennheiser, you'll see Shure, you'll see some Lectrosonics, but I think you're more likely to see Shure and Sennheiser. Lloyd might be able to help out here too in the chat. Lloyd's got some experience in that front. But I think it's basically going to be mainly Sennheiser and a little bit of Lectrosonics. In the film world, then, of course, that's a very different story. That's where you're going to see mainly Lectrosonics, and you're going to see some of the other small ones. In Europe, you'll see a lot more Wizicom, although Wizicom is making a little bit more of an impact here in the United States now. Zaxcom, Sennheiser, of course. Although I don't see quite as much Sennheiser. There's a little bit of Sony. I think in broadcast, you're more likely to see things like Sony versus film and TV production. And then audio limited, you're going to see on boom poles a fair bit nowadays. So there's kind of an overview from my point of view on that. Matt, I went with the ADX5D because I already had the TL48. Well, that's brilliant. That should hope that works out well for you. And thank you, Vincent. High-end Shure wireless mic rec transmitter fund. It'll be a while before I can afford one of those, but thank you. McGuire Brannon, any strong opinions on recorders in wireless transmitters as a backup for interference? The A10 TXUS still locks the feature, assuming it's still that legal licensing issue. Yeah. Do I have strong opinions? Yes, I do. I would like to see... So the Zaxcom owns a patent that prevents that from happening in most cases. So what can happen in the case of audio limited, for example, the A10 TX, you can actually use it to record and transmit at the same time on a boom microphone, but not with a lavalier microphone. So the reason for that is that they haven't licensed that from Zaxcom. And I think the world may be changing a little bit. I don't know. I can't remember exactly. I think that patent runs out sometime like 2027. I don't remember the details on that. But we have finally seen Zaxcom license that technology to one other company, Deity Microphones. But we haven't seen them license it to any of the higher-end brands like Audio Limited, Lectrosonics, so on and so forth. And I think what we're seeing is we're starting to see some of the other companies come up with ways to work around that. So it'll be interesting to see. Right now we're seeing, and the reason I say that, I haven't seen anything that works around that particular issue yet in the United States versions of those products. But what we are seeing, for example, is that the Axient Digital transmitters, you don't set gain on the transmitter pack. You actually control it at the receiver. So you kind of get around this whole 32-bit float recording, or it's not actually 32-bit float recording on the Zaxcom gear. It's actually 24-bit, but they use a proprietary audio format to capture wider dynamic range. But you're seeing these other companies come out with other ways to solve the same problems. I don't know that we've seen one yet for recording. I guess I would say the one thing we have seen on the consumer end is that the Rode Wireless Go systems, they now record in the transmitter, but the way they got around the patent is that the recording media is not removable. So it's actually on the printed circuit board inside the unit, and you have to connect the unit via USB to a computer to download the recorded audio. So I think we'll probably see some things coming here pretty soon. I'd love to see it sooner than later. It's a good question. Thank you, McGuire. And McGuire, it's great to see you here. Thanks for joining us. All right, we ready to move on? Okay, let's jump over to our question and answer session. First up, we have a question from Alan. What's the go-to one-person, two-person lav system this season? I tried a lav mic through the MixPre 3, and it was not as sharp outside as when indoors. Well, Alan, I guess we'd probably need a little bit more context to give you a really solid answer. If you're talking about consumer, are you just talking about the lavalier system, or are you talking about the wireless system? So if you're just talking about lavalier microphones, there are lots of options you can plug into a lot of different systems. I guess, and I'd be curious to know which system you're using. I guess it is a wireless system you're talking about. Which system you're using currently, so that I don't recommend the same one. I mean, obviously on the high end, I would highly recommend a SHURE Axient Digital system. But most of us are not in that playing in that domain necessarily. I'm very happy with my audio limited system. It has never failed me. It's a little bit more work in terms of frequency coordination than you'd probably have on the Axient Digital, which also does some automatic setting up, especially if you're running a lot of channels. Another thing they claim, within a single TV station band, you can transmit up to 48 channels, which is just mind-blowing. So on that end, on the lower end, on the consumer end, it's really kind of tricky because it feels like there's a ton of kind of pretty mediocre consumer-grade wireless mic systems, mostly working on the 2.4 gigahertz. You meant wireless system. You're using Countryman via XLR into MixPre 3. Okay, thanks for the background info. That's really helpful. The things like the Rode Wireless Go 2, they can fit a lot of needs, but they're 2.4 gigahertz, so you don't have any frequency diversity of any sort. You can't choose a different frequency. So if you're in a location where things are just not working out, there's a ton of, say there's a Wi-Fi wireless access point right above where you absolutely have to shoot. You either have to turn off the wireless access point or you're just out of luck. You have to move to a different location. So there are things like that. Another downside of those, they're pretty good. I mean, they're surprisingly good. For $300, you're getting a dual channel single receiver system. But you don't set the gain on those either, and you can clip them. So if you're working with really loud sound sources, or if there's going to be yelling or screaming, or a lot of laughter, loud laughter, then that system just may not work out. So those are some of the challenges with those consumer-oriented systems. I'm not as fond of Saramonic has some, their Blink 500 and their Blink 500 Pro. The Blink 500 sounded pretty awful to me with the built-in microphones, although you could attach an external microphone. The Blink 500 Pro was a little bit better. Then there's the Hollyland Lark 150. They're okay. They do solve the problem of, I think you have input level on the Saramonic and on the Hollyland, but you don't have the recording at the transmitter. Recording at the transmitters could be a really nice feature, as McGuire brought up earlier. So those are kind of the three main ones that come to mind here. There's also Pico Mic. They have a new version. I've reviewed the old one a couple of years ago, and it was pretty good, except for the microphone sounded horrible. The new one evidently fixes that. They're better sounding. But those were pretty impressive too, and the transmitters were tiny. It's basically a clip-on transmitter. You just clip it onto your shirt, and they were really small, basically like the size of a small USB drive. So that's another option there as well. If I had to choose one, I'd probably choose the Rode Wireless Go 2. But that's mostly just going to be for talking. If you're doing anything outside of talking, it's a little bit problematic. Second part of Alan's question, tangentially, Final Cut Pro 10 is actually, but just by the way, I learned this fairly recently. It's not Final Cut Pro 10 anymore. It's Final Cut Pro now. They dropped the 10 once we moved to Big Sur. So Alan has a question about audio sync. I know you can sync video and audio in the import box before adding it to the timeline, but what are the keyboard steps to sync audio track to video tracks within the timeline? I looked at that and I didn't see a way to do it actually in the timeline unless you do it manually. So I think if you want the auto sync feature, you have to do it in the bin before you actually drop it in the timeline. And if someone else knows better than that, please let us know in the chat. But I didn't see a way to do that. In short, once you drop those two, the audio and video clips into the timeline, if you highlight them both, the option to sync automatically just goes away. So from what I can tell, that is not enabled within Final Cut. All right, moving on to the next question. Thank you, Alan. Next up from David, I want to use an XLR splitter, one female, two males coming out of a shotgun mic and going into a Zoom F4 and a camera. My question is, as a result of the split, will the Zoom F4 be receiving a degraded signal coming out of the splitter? Possibly yes and possibly no. It depends. But what I would recommend, let's go to our overhead camera. If you are going to do that, I would recommend you use an isolating transformer of some sort. This is one example, the Ice Cube by Radial Engineering. So I would put this between the microphone and the F8, for example. And then that way you shouldn't have any interference between the two or one of them messing up the signal on the other. I would say, however, if we go back to just kind of thinking, if we go back to the question here, if we take a step back, I don't know if there's a reason you can't do this, but typically what I would do in this situation is I would run the shotgun microphone into the Zoom F4, and then I would run an output from the F4 to the camera. So instead of sharing the input from the microphone, I would bring the microphone into the Zoom F4 and then an output from the F4 into the camera. There could be reasons you can't do that, I don't know, but that would be my preferred method of doing that. But if you are going to use a splitter cable, I would highly, highly recommend you use an isolator, like the Ice Cube. All right, moving on next. This is a two-part or it's not a two-part question, it's a long question, so we broke it up into two parts. I'd like your opinion on how to grab location sound to be used as a background track under the vocal tracks for locations that have an active scene going on in them. For example, or that is, a ball game, a restaurant with other diners and waitstaff, or a manufacturing facility where you actually see someone doing something that would make a specific noise. I shoot corporate location talking heads mostly, but see an opportunity to improve my deliverables by having the actual laughing someone does in the background match up, or the actual grinder grinding stuff sounds, not B-roll, and definitely not Foley or sound effects. I have a working understanding of the microphone types, their polar patterns, and pluses and minuses of that, so this took me down the rabbit hole of PZM microphones and how I could record a location background track along with the Law of Talents audio to be mixed down in the final edit, without having to specifically boom the background with a shotgun mic, hoping I guessed right on capturing the action. Robert, that's certainly a valid approach to that. I find in most cases that most of the scenarios where I've done that kind of work, I didn't feel like I needed an additional track of the ambiance noise because we were getting plenty of it in the Talents mics, both the boom and the lavaliers. But if you do want to, bring that in as a separate thing as well, definitely a PZM could be a fine choice. Good way to do that. So definitely seems like you're on the right track there. If anyone else has other recommendations, definitely let us know. Just even another lavalier as a plant mic somewhere would do a fine job at that as well. Most lavs are omnidirectional, so that could be a good choice. In fact, usually when I've recorded Walla in the past, that is that's more of a Foley sound effects kind of thing, and I realize that's not what you want, but we often use a lavalier for that because they're omnidirectional. You can easily paste them or tape them, I should say, to a mic stand, and then you can have your Walla group walk around them while they're talking to create sort of the restaurant conversation sound. And that's worked really, really nicely. So I would think a lavalier microphone could work too if you have a spare one on hand. All right. Thank you for that, Robert. James has a little bit of a troubleshooting question here. We stream our church service to Facebook. Setup is the same each week. Mics into a Behringer mixer into a camera, C100, via XLR line-in, camera into the ATEM switcher, ATEM into OBS on a MacBook Pro. We select the camera sound on the ATEM. It works every week. But the last few weeks, the audio has been out of sync. Any thoughts? Thank you. My troubleshooting method is always to work your way through the entire signal chain from the start all the way through to the end. And so that'll help you identify where you're having an issue. So what I would probably do is I would take a look at the Behringer mixer. I don't know if it has any digital effects. Sometimes the digital effects can introduce some latency. So if somebody recently added some sort of digital processing effect, that's the first thing I would check. From there, I would make sure that the Canon C100 is not doing anything, so I would do a recording with the audio going into the mixer, then to the C100 and record at the camera, do a clap test and make sure everything's in sync there. After that, then I would do the exact same thing, recording from the ATEM. You can plug in, if you have the ATEM Mini Pro or above, you can plug in a USB drive or like an external USB drive and record directly to the ATEM, do the clap test again, make sure everything's in sync there. And in OBS, there's also the possibility of applying an audio offset. So once you finish recording and if everything's okay at the ATEM, then you do a recording in OBS, exact same thing, do the clap test and see if you've got any sort of latency there or anything out of sync. So if you just work your way through the signal chain like that, that can work. If you get to the end all the way through OBS and there is no sort of delay or sync issue, then it's probably Facebook. And I have noticed there have been times when YouTube plays back out of sync. Usually refreshing the stream or closing that window and going back to the stream solves that issue. I don't know as much about Facebook because I haven't streamed to Facebook before. I've been on streams where they were going to Facebook, but I've never hosted a stream going to Facebook, but they could have similar issues on that side too. So those are some of my thoughts. If anyone else has other ideas for James to check out, please leave that in the chat as well. And thank you, James, for the question. All right, next up from Mick. I'm going to need some help with this one because I don't have experience with these. Mick says, I'm new to sound recording and interested in field recording the sounds of nature, streams, birds, animals, and forests using my Mix Pre 6.2 to accompany my video footage. I know someone who is selling the following 2 microphones at quite a bargain price. Would either of these 2 be ideal? And he refers to the LAM UC Pro and the Audio-Technica BP 4025. So let's just go over to the Mac here. For those that are not familiar with them, let me just kind of zoom in here. There we go. Getting in a little closer there. This is the LAM UC Pro. It looks like a stereo microphone with 2 capsules and a set of cables there, along with clips. I think you'd also want to get something to mount these on and probably set up an ORTF stereo array. I've never used these, so if anyone else has, I know they've come up before on the Sound for Video session, so I think somebody's probably used them out there that's part of this community. If you do have experience with them, it'd be great if you could share those with Mick. So that's the first one. The second one is the Audio-Technica BP 4025. Now, I think I've talked to a lot more people that have used this one. This one seems to be pretty well respected. So I have not personally used this one firsthand, so I don't have any experience with it. This one could be mounted inside of for example, a Rycote wind jammer or wind cover or any of the other brands as well. So this one could work pretty well that way. Whereas I think the LAM, you could put the covers on each of the individuals if you're not working with in a really breezy, really strong winds kind of situation. If you just needed something that's not here, they have their wind bubbles, for example, that are €40. It's almost half the price of the mics. But this one would be the type of thing you'd put in a Zeppelin type cover instead. And they show, here are the capsules. So the capsules are interesting there. They call it an XY stereo image with the spatial impact and realism of a live sound field. That looks a little bit, the angles are a little bit different than what I would have expected for an XY. But nevertheless, that's what you'd be looking at there. If you're looking for a stronger stereo effect, something with like ORTF that you could configure with these on a stereo bar might be a better choice. XY is really neat, but it usually is the recorded sound is usually something you can use without as much post work, but it doesn't generally sound quite as wide as an ORTF stereo recording. So there are some thoughts there, Mick, on that particular question. Danny has a question, and we're going to turn on her mic so that she can share. So if you want to go ahead and go to the main camera there. All right, I'm going to switch over here. We're going to turn off my mic and turn on Danny's.
There's just some catch-up comments.
Okay.
Is now a good time for that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Going to do some catch-up comments. First up, from Boulder Surfer. You can create sync clips or a multicam clip in the browser by selecting the audio and video. Then the appropriate command, double-clicking the resulting clip opens. Wait, go back to that.
This is Final Cut.
Okay, so this is a Final Cut sync. You can create sync clips or a multicam clip in the browser by selecting the audio and video, then the appropriate command, double-clicking the resulting clip opens the clip in the timeline area, and you can adjust sync manually there if needed. Ah, okay. Excellent. Thank you, Boulder Surfer. So it looks like there is a little bit of a way to do that. Multicam clips offer some advantages over just doing the sync clip. Excellent.
And then
Thank you for that.
we have a flurry.
It's very nice to have a community. Thank you, TechMed. Appreciate that. Sonoga, thanks so much for the tea. And Alan, thank you so much as well, and for the question. Mark, I'm curious to know if Sennheiser will package their EWD wireless digital system for portable use, a 2-channel receiver maybe. Could it be a lower cost, high quality system? That would be really interesting. I would love to see some of those as well. And the same with Shure's SLXD. Great system, love it. But the receivers are all half rack receivers, and so it's just not something that's practical for location sound, for example. So if you have a big sound cart, you could probably mount things up like that, but it'd be nice to see some of those kind of UHF transmitting digital systems with bag receivers, and somewhere in the middle range, not like at the top of the end, your top of the range with Axient and Electrosonics and all that stuff, but something that's a little bit more in the, if I could get 2 channels for $1,500 or maybe $2,000, that would be a pretty neat thing to see. I agree with you 100%. Mike, splitting a mic signal. I'm so glad you brought this up, Mike. Most splitters, which are not simple split cables, have an onboard ISO transformer on one output. This should stop the 2 inputs on systems interacting. Thank you for that. So getting those higher quality cables, splitter cables, is another option as well. Good. All right, back to the questions here. Next question from Mick. Another microphone recommendation, please. I am studying photography at university and we are allowed to sound record the lectures. I have never noticed anyone ever recording before. iPhone's built-in microphone just can't pick up the sound, but for year 2, I would like to start recording the sessions with the MixPre 6.2. The lecture rooms are usually large rooms which can accommodate up to 60 students with the lecturer moving around at the front. I would prefer a smallish microphone if there are any that you would think would be suitable. Well, I would probably use a shotgun microphone to get a little bit more reach. Because yes, I think generally the iPhone built-in microphone is probably, I think it's basically an omnidirectional microphone that does some attempts at noise reduction is my guess. But if you use a shotgun microphone, that's going to be more directional. And I guess in terms of small shotgun microphones, one that comes to mind is there's the DDS Mic 2S. It would work for lectures. It's not my favorite mic. It's pretty noisy. So not my favorite mic there. I don't know what your budget is. Sanken has the CSM M1, I think it's called. I don't know the exact model number. Short shotgun microphone as well. If you wanted a little bit more of a professional microphone. Is there a comment on this? Oh, Danny has a comment here. Okay, you're live.
I was wondering if the lecturer is using a mic already, if you could plug your recorder into the PA system of the room, and then you wouldn't have to worry about placing a mic.
That is a great point, Danny. Thank you for that. So yeah, with your MixPre, if there is a PA system in the lecture, then that would be a great way to do it. Did any of our professors well, in the really big, when you had the big lecture halls, they did. I did this for my own photography class. I just asked the teacher to clip a Rode Wireless Go on, problem solved. That's a great idea, Mark. Great idea. So yeah, that's another option for you as well, Mick, is if you work with a wireless system that would go into your MixPre. That would get the microphone really close to the sound source, so it would solve a lot of problems. Good. Some good ideas. Any other good ideas? Go ahead and drop those in the chat as well. Would very much appreciate those. All right, that's all the questions we had submitted ahead of time. Let's go back out to our main cam and take a look in the chat to see what we've got going out there. Danny's going to do a little run through things. It is a beautiful day in the Rocky Mountains here. We are in full-on allergy season, so I like to apologize for my how that seems to be affecting my voice. But we're keeping the herbal teas flowing here, and that's working well. Mark has a question. What's the ongoing cost of a Pro Lav system in terms of breakage from wear and tear? How long can you expect a Pro Lav to last when it costs several $100s? Good question. You have to keep in mind that I do some location sound freelance work, but not very much in the last couple of years. And even before then, it was like 5 or 6 jobs a year. So you're getting my perspective on that. It's important to keep in mind that when you're working in those circumstances, you are charging, you're basically renting out the equipment to the production. And so you're building in that cost so that you're paying for that. What I have found is that with the very high quality microphones, the Sanken Cost 11Ds, my Shure Twinplex, my Countryman has been pretty good. That one seems a little bit more delicate because it's so small and the diameter of the cable is so small. Those may not hold up quite as long, but I've had really good luck with those so far. And I've had, what you're going to find is you're going to have talent going into bathrooms to change out a costume or having to use the restroom. And, they're going to come back out and they're holding the cable with the transmitter pack dangling from it. You've got all sorts of crazy stuff that happens. But so far, I would say that they hold up pretty well. I think you could probably, if you're doing production sound and you have a kit that you're renting out to the productions, I think you should be able to realistically expect one of those mics to last a year. That's my best educated guess. Mine are lasting longer because I don't do quite as many jobs. So there's some thoughts on that. Vincent says, I wonder, with the scarcity of things, prices are rapidly escalating, at least in the high-end audio. Is it getting hard to get stuff? It is. Harman, for instance, I wanted a mixer and can't get it. I am summarizing. I'm using my own words a little bit there. Yeah, there is definitely a supply chain issue. In fact, for work, we went to go buy a tripod head just recently, and I went to all the regular suspects, B&H, Adorama, and then a lot of broadcast places. I ended up at Film Tools and getting a 100 millimeter ball style tripod head that could handle 25 pounds or so. There was basically 1 or 2 in stock. That was all they had. And I had to ask the people there to actually help me, instead of searching the entire site. And we did search, for a good 15, 20 minutes. They eventually went and did some searching and found one for us finally. But there are definitely some supply chain issues and you're seeing it not just in the high-end audio market, but you're seeing it in a lot of other places as well. I understand that mixed pre's are really hard to come by right now. Like, it's really difficult to purchase a Sound Devices mixed pre. I don't know hopefully the future is a little bit brighter and we get those supply chain issues solved here before too much longer. Any free audio software apps similar to Audition to recommend? Yeah, I would say it's not exactly Audition, but I would say DaVinci Resolve's Fairlight is probably the most capable that I've encountered. I'm not as big of a fan of Audacity. I mean, it's not a bad place to learn, but Audacity's taken kind of a weird turn where it's now been purchased by a company. And I think they still have the open source version. Anyway, I'm not as big of a fan of that for a variety of reasons, but I think probably if you really want to learn how to mix for film and video, that DaVinci Resolve is a good choice. That's my probably first choice. And if anyone else has recommendations, definitely let us know in the chat. Matt, I was a church sound guy for 7 years, and we had to replace cable Countryman cables about every 100 uses. The Shure are a little stronger, and most things are repairable. Yeah, it's a good point too. Once you get into the pro space, you're probably looking at repairs as well. So that's the nice thing about the pro level gear, is a lot of it can be repaired by the sound houses like Gotham Sound, True Audio, Sound Department, and others. So good point, Matt. Thanks for bringing that up. Sonoga, any comparison on the build quality between Sennheiser and Shure? Sennheiser seems to have plastic mics. I thought in the higher end mics, like if you got into the MKE2, and they don't make a lot of lavalier mics. You know, the MKE2 is basically their flagship lavalier mic, from what I understand. And actually the Shures, like even these are plastic. The Duraplex. I don't actually get too concerned about that in lavalier microphones. This head, I'm pretty sure, is a plastic. Yeah. This is the Duraplex that we were looking at earlier. So metal versus plastic on these, I'm not as concerned about. But I've used the Sennheiser ME2s and MKE2. The MKE2 I've only used a little bit, so I only had it for a couple of months. And it seemed fine in terms of durability. The Shure mics have been very solid for me. As Matt said, he found that they were a little bit more durable than the Countryman's. But again, repairability is another factor to take into consideration once you buy the pro level mics. In some cases, they can be repaired. So if they just have to, it's a lot cheaper to just swap out a cable on a microphone versus the entire thing, if you can do that. So some things to keep in mind there. Jordan has a 1 out of 2 question. I have 2 Deity BPTRX devices with version 1.3 firmware. It seems if I record over 2 hours internally, when I press stop, the BPTRX shows please wait indefinitely. Devices still show after 30 hours. Ooh. What online forums should I get involved in to solve sound issues like the BPTRX in the future? Well, I know there are a number of Facebook forums. There's also the jwsoundgroup.net. I don't know how active those are versus the Facebook forums these days. I think they're probably both still active. But frankly, Deity microphones should be supporting that. If you have a technical problem, they should support it. If they are not supporting it, that's really not a good sign. So I would go first to Deity support, and then I would go to the Facebook forums. And if anyone knows the specifics on the Facebook forums, I don't have time to spend on Facebook, and so I don't. So I don't really know where they're at. So if anyone in the chat could direct our friend Jordan to the Facebook forums, that'd be really helpful as well. And then there's jwsoundgroup.net. Now, I will warn you, jwsoundgroup.net, it's mostly production sound mixers that are full-time professionals. They don't use a lot of Deity gear, so it's going to be hard to get probably a lot of support there. So I'd probably look to the Facebook forums first. Or the Facebook groups, I guess they're called. Oh yeah, Lloyd brings up a powerful DAW choice is Reaper. However, it's a deep dive. Yeah, I would say it is a deep dive. The licensing it's fairly affordable. I think is there a free version? There's at least a trial version. And I don't know what the round tripping is like. So if it can handle the what's the formats? There's the older format is OMFs if you're getting sound for picture, and then there's also is it the AIFF or there's a more recent XML format that you can use to transfer a video that's been edited from a nonlinear editor over into an audio DAW. And I don't know how the support is for that in Reaper, but that's definitely a consideration. I know Alan Williams, Sound Speeds on YouTube, he uses Reaper. I used to use it years ago. It's a great DAW. Sheriff Logs. Studio One Prime is free, and Cakewalk by BandLab, Pro Tools, and other free DAW do Google search. Okay, so there's a Pro Tools 1, which is, I don't remember if it's free or it does have some limitations in terms of the number of, I think, plugins you can use and the number of tracks you can use, but that's an option. Cakewalk, I always thought of more of a music production DAW, but I don't know, I haven't looked at it in years. So Studio One Prime is another free version, basically like Pro Tools 1. Studio One Prime is worth looking at as well. If I were going to learn one, I'd probably look at Studio One of those that you've listed there. I've just bought an Azden SMX30. I want to put it on a boom while connecting it to a camera directly. What can I do? Not familiar with that mic. Let's take a look. Is that the little 3.5 millimeter mic? Azden, I think it is, SMX30. I think it's the one that has the stereo mic and the shotgun mic. Yeah, I did look at this one years ago. Here it is over at Adorama. As I recall, yeah, it's the stereo mic plus the shotgun mic. So you're going to want to get something like a Rode VC1 extension cable, and you'll be able to mount this on top. I don't remember what the mechanism here is, a cold or a shoe mount, but I think there's also a tap on the bottom, and I don't remember if it's 1/4 inch or if it's 3/8 inch, but you may need an adapter, and you can get those over at Amazon or lots of other places as well. Usually a boom pole will have a 3/8 inch thread screw on the top, so you're going to want 3/8 inch. The Azden may already have that, I'm not sure, but that's how you could get that up on a boom pole and then run the cable out to your camera. Now you have to be careful. There is risk because you're working with an unbalanced cable there, an unbalanced connection. So you want to keep that cable very much away from power cables, from any other sources of electromagnetic fields, and also especially away from AC adapters, which tend to be really noisy from an EM point of view. So it won't get you a lot of distance from the camera, but it'll at least get you started. So hopefully that helps for you. All right, any thoughts on a regular broadband click in a recording? I was asked to clean unbalanced line into a simple digital recorder. Could it be proximity to a broadband Wi-Fi router? Yes, it could be. Typically when I found like Wi-Fi signals, they're not, I mean, they're not across the entire audible spectrum, but they go regularly. They sound kind of like a little high-pitched, I can't really reproduce it exactly with my voice, but that's what I've heard usually on those. It's probably RF of some sort is my guess. Or it could be other types of electromagnetic interference. So it's an unbalanced line into a simple digital recorder. I'd probably suspect RF, to be honest, but yeah. And a Wi-Fi wireless access point or something like that would probably be a good educated guess, definitely. That's the trick with those unbalanced connections.
Going back.
Oh, you've got a 4.5 meter. We're going back to the microphone question, the Azden SMX30. I've got a 4.5 meter, 3.5 millimeter audio cable from a brand called Somo, and it's not bad, but is it the best option? If it is, what can I do to avoid electromagnetic noise? So just the things I mentioned before. I've never used that brand. If you're not picking up noise, then that's a good thing. So stick with it. You're going to test that as a capable audio engineer. You're going to test that yourself. If you want to hear what the interference sounds like, go ahead and plug in an AC adapter of some sort, like a little brick adapter, power adapter, and run the cable right by it, and feed the signal from your microphone right by that AC adapter on the extension cable into your camera. Put on some headphones, and you will hear what I'm talking about. Yeah, be careful on the volume too. Always protect your ears. Okay. Let's see. I'm currently using a Steinberg Nuendo for music and Atmos. Very good. There's another option there too for you. I believe, is Steinberg Nuendo, is that Windows only? It used to be, I think. I'm not positive, but thank you for that, Sheriff Vlogs. Was that Pincer speaking? It was. He was trying to help me out, but we need a little work on that. He's much better at it than I am, but his signal to noise ratio is pretty awful because you can see he's a good solid 4 feet from the microphone. So maybe we'll get him a mic for next week. All right. Is that everything? We have just a few more minutes. If you have any questions, go ahead and put @CurtisJuddAudio, and we'll take just a couple more minutes here to take a look at things. In the meantime, I'm going to think ahead, get the music queued up for when we're done here. Yeah, we'll just get that queued up. Is it playing? No, good, okay. Both Mac and Windows for Nuendo. Very good, thank you for that, Sheriff Logs. Today, audio signal chain, same as usual for me. We got the SR314 from Earthworks going into the Shelford channel by Rupert Neve Designs, and that's going into the Canon C70. Danny is actually on the Zoom F8 and a Shure KSM8 handheld. Is that the KSM8? Trying to remember the model number. Yeah, KSM8. And then the Zoom F8 is going into the ATEM. We have another question from Paul. Is it possible to use Rode, I assume that means Rode SmartLav Plus plugged to a combo jack on a PC? I believe so, yes, but you won't have any way to hear unless you also use a splitter cable. So I think the answer is yes. Yes. In most cases, it's going to be yes. Lloyd, did you get the Limo 3 option for the Shure transmitters? Yes. We have the 3. I learned something very interesting about this, incidentally. They had originally sent me the Duraplex microphones, and I told them, hey, I'm using Audio Limited A10. I've got the 3-pin Limo. And so that's what they sent me, but they actually pin them differently. The pinout for Shure on 3-pin Limo is different than for Audio Limited. So that's why they sent me the Axient system, which I didn't complain about, to do my Duraplex review with. So it turns out that if you're going to use Duraplex or Twinplex with the Audio Limited A10 system, you have to have it specifically terminated for A10. So that's probably going to mean you're going to want to buy it from someplace like True Audio, Gotham Sound, one of those sound houses. All right. Well, it looks like we're all good for this week. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And we did not put a video up on the main channel this week because the week was just really crazy. We started a video. It's not done. It will be posted sometime this week. So we're looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us today. Get out there and make some great sound. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Take care, everybody.